For me, this is my ultimate gravel bike setup for 2021, and which I put to the ultimate challenge by riding the 350-kilometre King Alfred's Way, a brand new circular off-road route which is ideally suited for bikepacking exploits. Now, you can watch my video of that ride by clicking the link in the description down below, and hopefully a banner up there somewhere as well, so you can go and watch that and find out what it's like to ride 350 kilometers over 3 days. But in this video, I'm going to go through the bike and some of my equipment choices for this ride and see what you think of it, really. Now, this is my version of an ultimate gravel bike. Your version of the ultimate gravel bike and bikepacking setup may differ, so I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. But let's dive in. So underneath all the dirt and dust and sweat and luggage is a Fairlight Cycles Secan, my very own personal frame that I bought a few years ago. So Reynolds 853 steel frame, and I love steel for the ride quality, the way it looks, and the fact it's just tough as old boots and will last a lifetime. Really nice details on this frame as well, including wide tyre clearance. But let's start with the luggage on my bike because it's a bikepacking adventure, 3 days and 2 nights. So this is a bikepacking setup I use, which is an indication of how you can do it. But I know bikepacking does vary hugely depending on where you live and the style of riding you do it and how fast and how luxurious you want to be when you get to your campsite in the evening. So I've got 4 packs on the bike, as you can see, and this big bag in the front has all my sleeping equipment. So that's a tent, that's a sleeping bag, and that's an inflatable roll mat. And yes, I can't believe I got all that into the bag here. Quite unbelievable. You might think that affects the handling, the steering, but it really doesn't. It adds a bit more weight to the steering, but it doesn't adversely affect the way the bike handles, which really surprised me. The bike retained the agility, the fun factor on some of the faster swooping trails we encountered on the King Alfred's Way. So that wasn't a problem. You do need a wider handlebar, which this definitely is a very wide handlebar, but I'll come back to that in a minute. So on the top tube is a small bag, which I use for my GoPro and microphone to record the experience, but more commonly used for food and other essentials. Inside the frame pack, I had mostly food, mostly flapjacks, and a small bag with all my bike repair kits, so multi-tool, 2 spare inner tubes, tubeless plugs, and some other bits and bobs. On the other side, I had my credit card, some cables for charging my GoPro and my computer, some antibacterial wipes, and some other bits and bobs. And then moving to the back, in this seat pack here, well, I've got a dangle mug. That's mainly to see how many people that annoys. Let me know what you think of it down below. But inside there, got my stove, my gas canister, everything I need to cook some breakfast in the morning and a cup of coffee. Then some spare clothing, I didn't really take much, a spare jersey, some socks, and some lightweight hiking trousers and a lightweight t-shirt for the evening. I did have a puffer coat underneath here, which I lost on the final day, but since that happened, it's been retrieved. Somebody was actually riding the route behind us and sent me a message, and it's in the post winging its way back to me. So I have my coat underneath there, but lesson learned there, make sure it's securely strapped down. So those are the bags I used. Then moving to equipment choices, I'll start at the front. So I went for a 40mm wide gravel tyre, a brand new tyre from Hutchinson I've been testing. Nice fast rolling tread, worked really well for the mostly dry conditions we had, although we did encounter some mud and it worked okay. They're tubeless, of course, on MV G23 wheels, which I know is a bit of an indulgent choice, but nice and light and does take some of the weight off the bike because the steel frame isn't the lightest option compared to carbon fibre or titanium. Tyre pressures were higher than I normally run, so 40 psi at the back and 35 at the front. And that's largely because the bike doubled in weight with all the luggage and because of a secret weapon I had on this bike. I used a suspension stem and suspension seat post from Redshift, which I've been testing, and I will do a separate video review on these. But by using the suspension stem and seat post, allow me to run those slightly higher pressures and not really compromise the comfort. And the comfort was fantastic. And my back really enjoyed the benefit of this suspension seat post, and the stem worked wonders on some of the rougher, rowdier sections. Fantastic to have that extra comfort, which over 3 days of riding, I know on a rigid seat post and a rigid stem, my back would have been in bits. So for me, real game changers. Yes, they add weight, but the comfort they offer on a bikepacking adventure like that, really worth their weight in gold. And after 3 days riding a suspension seat post and stem, I'm sold on the idea of a bit of suspension on a gravel bike. Not a suspension fork or rear suspension. In a way, a mountain bike might be a better choice, but just enough to take the edge off. And we're seeing some really interesting developments like that BMC with a soft tail and a Specialized Diverge with a Future Shock. So I think there's definitely space for a bit of suspension on a gravel bike without getting it away too far from its sort of road cyclocross routes and into the realms of a mountain bike. And then up front, I had a Redshift handlebar that I'm also testing. Very wide, flared handlebar. But a really neat trick of this handlebar are the optional grips on the drops, which give you an extra precision. Just support the nerves going through the palm of your hand and into your wrist more than a normal handlebar. And some foam inserts underneath the bar tape here, which give you an extra precision, so you can sort of rest your palm, just spreads the pressure better across a wider area. Those two things alone gave me more positions when I'm riding, and on a long adventure, especially a 3-day ride, being able to move your hands to different positions just helps reduce the stress and load on your arms, just stops them kind of getting rigor mortis basically when you're riding in the same fixed position for so long. I also like the bar tape, nice and grippy without gloves, a bit of sponginess as well, so that worked well. For navigation and recording my ride, I'm using the brand new Wahoo Element Bolt, which you might see in my video first look on above. So a nice long battery life, easy ran all day. I charge it up from a battery pack in the evening when we're camping. Easy navigation, turn by turn directions. The new colour on the screen really helps to distinguish between roads, country lanes and gravel tracks, and it worked reliably, no issues at all. And then a bell, because some of the trails and paths, bridleways, you're sharing them with other cyclists, dog walkers, horse riders. Having that bell really helps to alert them to your presence, so that's an essential. I then have 2 water bottles in the frame, the biggest water bottles I can fit, and a frame pump, which is actually a mountain bike pump for the bigger volume gravel tyres. And a top tip from me is to wrap some electrical tape around your pump in case you need to bodge something back in your bike if it falls apart. And that's on the frame, so it's easily accessible and takes up less space in your packs. And then moving to the gearing choices. Now, gearing is important on a gravel bike and important when you're riding with extra luggage because the bike is a lot heavier than normal. I'll be riding most of a Shimano GRX group set. Got the old RX rear mech when it first came out, I'll be using that. So I have an 1140 cassette on the back and a 40 tooth chainring on the front. And for me, that was low enough just on some of the steeper climbs, even with the luggage. But you might want lower gear if you're unsure about your fitness on some of those steeper climbs or you're carrying even more weight. On some of those steeper climbs, I was definitely envious of my friend's bike with a SRAM Eagle 1050 cassette, which is the ultimate setup for really low spinny spin gears on those steeper climbs. Been climbing for ages, so I'm nowhere near the summit. Still miles away. So definitely go for as low gear as you think you might need, or even lower than you think you need, because the weight of the bike does surprise you on the steeper climbs, and there are some quite steep climbs on the King Alfred's Way. And when you're tired after 3 days of riding, you might want an even lower gear than you normally ride when you're fresh riding a bike without luggage. I had no problems from the Shimano GRX group set. The gears, the brakes, hydraulic disc brakes on a bike like this with extra weight, the extra stopping power, one finger braking in all situations is just fantastic. So the group set didn't give me any issues at all. Didn't have to charge the battery up because it was 3 days. So it's all typically top, not an issue at all. And then saddle choice is very important for a 3-day ride. I was wearing the same pair of shorts for 3 days. I know it sounds smeggy as anything, but try and save weight and try and travel light. It's not so bad actually, it's not so bad. Put some cream on, you'll be okay. So saddle choice, I'm quite a fan of these short nose stubby saddles at the moment, and I've got this Specialized power saddle, and this is the Elaston version with this sort of trainer derived foam padding, which works really well for me. So that was my saddle choice, and I spent 3 days in it and had no discomfort at all. And then lastly, Shimano SPD pedals. They were actually my first ever clipless pedal when I was a teenager all those years ago. and then my preferred system for off-road riding. These are trail ones, so they're double-sided, and you can ride in flip-flops, because I use flip-flops in the evening, down to the pub for a food. And with shoes like these, Cities, which I'm using, you've got more tread, so you can walk more easily when you're hiking, or pushing your bike, or going to the cafe or pub for lunch. Now, when it comes to bike packing, there's really no right or wrong. And as I saw over 3 days riding King Alfred's Way, there are many different interpretations and approaches to carrying the stuff you think you need for 3 days or more when you're bike packing and riding unsupported. And there's a real balance between being light and fast, but also comfort and a few luxuries for the evening when you're resting after your long day's ride. For me, this setup worked really well. Having small packs really forced me to be ruthless about what I took, and I tried to ensure that everything I took I would use, and that worked out to be the case. The only things I didn't actually use was some bug spray, some first aid kit stuff, which thankfully we didn't need, but everything I took I used. I ate all my food, I used all my clothing I took with me. I didn't take much clothing, but I used all the clothing I took. Everything got used at least once, if not more, and some stuff I doubled up as well. So trying to make sure everything earns its place in the packs here, because everything adds up very quickly. That weight really ramps up. This bike, without luggage, it's about 9.5 kilos, so call it 10 kilos. With luggage, just over 20 kilos. So the bike doubled in weight. But the amazing thing is, the bike didn't ride that bad at all. Yes, it felt heavier, a bit more sluggish, not quite as agile and responsive as it normally is, but it still rode really well. And once you get up to speed on flatter rolling roads, it carries that speed really well. And I'm really surprised and impressed with how all this weight, especially this handlebar bag, didn't adversely affect the handling of the bike. I still had loads of fun on the swooping trails and the fast descents on this bike, so it didn't adversely impact the handling, the performance and the steering of the bike. Just felt a bit more stable. In fact, it actually felt easier to ride at high speed on rougher sections with that extra weight, keeping the tyre pressing the ground for more traction and stopping it bouncing around as much. And of course, the suspension really helped on rougher sections. Those are the reasons why this is my ultimate gravel and bikepacking setup in 2021. But of course, I know your version of ultimate may be very different to mine. So let me know. Leave a comment down below, or maybe even tag me in an Instagram post or Twitter. I'll put links down below where you can find me on Instagram and Twitter. I'd love to see and read about your setups and see how they differ to mine or how similar they are to mine. But that's all for now. Hopefully you enjoyed this video tour of my gravel bike. Don't forget to watch my video on the actual King Alfred's Way experience by clicking the link down below. Just leave me to say thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all again next time.